I'm Matthew Munson, and welcome to Thanet Writers Meet Mark Holihan, author of There Are No Foreign Lands. Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here. Now, Mark, we are going to talk about your book in a little bit. I want to ask you questions about this, but before we do, I want to talk a bit about you and learn about the man, about the man behind the writing, if I may, just to start with. So, first of all, tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from, and what brought you from there to here.
From there to here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Northern California. I was brought up in Santa Cruz, which you may or may not know. It's on the coast, Monterey Bay, just south of San Francisco. I was born in San Francisco. I did a lot of traveling from a young age. I traveled for years, basically. I met my wife when I was living in London. We were married in Zaire a few years later and settled back home in Silicon Valley. And then after, I think we're about 6 years in the States, I had the opportunity, I wanted to move back to what I consider Europe, but it was Britain. But then I was actually given the opportunity from my company at the time to move back and be the graphics team for Europe for the company. And so I took that opportunity and came back and never left. So, that was quite a long time ago.
And you've been here ever since?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you ever kind of miss where you've come from? Because you are quite a seasoned traveller, I think. Do you ever get sort of that sense of nostalgia for where you've come from?
Absolutely. Oh, quite. There's a lot of things I really miss. The convenience of the States it's so nice.
Yeah.
There is the sort of delightful thing of being able to go to an all-night diner and know what you're going to get. It's you feel like just walking out and going someplace and doing something, and you can do in the States. Whereas here, you have to follow the rules. Things are open all the time. There's small things like that. But in general, I think I've become too anglicized to move back. I don't think I'd ever go back. I would consider moving on somewhere else in Europe, perhaps. But I don't think I'd go back to the States. The States feels very limiting to me. It's like a sort of giant monoculture that's enveloped lots of other cultures, which makes it very interesting, but it's something I'm so familiar with, even after all this time.
Yeah.
I like the idea of going to these obscure little places and living in a place that has a lot of heritage.
That's an interesting point you make that, actually, because obviously you've made your base in Thanet, you're living here now, but you don't rule out the possibility of another move in the future. If that's, where is home for you? Where do you get that sense of home from, or do you not have it at all?
That's a really good question. When I talk loosely of home, it's here. When I speak about things that I miss, it's there in the States. Home is where the family is, and at this point my kids are living in Cornwall, and we live here, so it's kind of split, because I really like going to Cornwall, being involved in the kids and their lives, and it's a lovely place, which actually does remind me of Northern California very much.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot like it. And a lot of the good things that I miss about my childhood in Northern California, they're there a bit in Cornwall, strangely enough. The whole surfy thing, the whole, the attitude, the way people are, the way people dress, the sort of semi-rundown, semi-industrial, but very lovely with beautiful landscape and stuff. It's a lot of that was my childhood in Northern California.
Well, actually, Mark, this is a really good opportunity, a nice segue from what you've been saying, to talk about your collection of poems. There Are No Foreign Lands. Now, that title in itself, I think, is quite evocative, I think, of something. I was looking on your publisher's website. I'm going to have to read this. I'm going to quote here. Pieces of memories from a place where your face and voice aren't foreign. Now, I love that kind of description of it, as a collection of works. How do you feel about that? Is that something that's evocative for you?
That's what I wrote that. That's actually one of the poems in there. Things You Can Keep,
right?
Which was sort of an alternate title for the collection, Things You Can Keep. But I felt the collection was about more than that. I had such a hard time trying to figure out a title for the collection.
Yeah.
I was quite happy when that sort of struck me. Yeah, and that's. I think it's a good way to describe it. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I find that your publishers chose that particular quote from your poems as how to publicise it on the site. Is there a place where you don't feel, as it were, foreign, and where you feel like one of the natives? Is there a place that you would call home above all others, that's kind of quite evocative for you? And essentially what I'm trying to get at is, what the hell inspired you to write these poems with this as a title?
Well, that's the thing. They are a collection of poems that have just come into being. That I didn't actually write them as a collection. I put them together as a collection from a huge mass of poems to try and make something that was somewhat coherent with some sort of slight sort of arc of narrative. Because most of my, well, all the poems I guess are pretty narrative. It was more feeling that I had to put something together. It was time, because I'd been putting it off for ages. It's a very intimate thing, writing poetry and exposing yourself in that way. Something is published that'll be there for whoever, and you giving it off. So it was quite an effort to come up with that. And once I had put together the poems, then I had to try and figure out, well, what do they mean to me? What is it all about? And there are no foreign lands. It is only the traveler who is foreign, is a Robert Louis Stevenson quote. And that's what I got that from. So there are no foreign lands. To me, there are no foreign lands. Well, yeah, everything is foreign. So how do you get around that? And when you think you know a place, you don't really know it anyway. And once I've been away from the States for so many years that it's completely foreign to me now. And Britain still is foreign because if you're not born in a place, it's difficult. So I don't think there is a home for me that's entirely home. Except for my backpacking on a Greek island or something like that. I'm like, home, yes.
So maybe the backpack is your home. That's an
in
interesting
some ways,
point.
in some ways, yeah. It's expanded now that the whole family's involved. Yeah, but yeah, I think part of it is creating your home just wherever you are.
Mark, I want to touch on something you did just say about poetry, kind of how it's quite a personal journey and how it kind of, you open up a part of yourself. I mean, from that maybe is giving an answer, but I mean, do you find poetry quite easy to write, quite hard? I mean, we were talking before the camera started rolling about your short stories as well that you write. I mean, is there something you find easier to create, something harder? I mean, for example, why did you choose a section of your poetry to publish first rather than your short stories? And do you have a preference for one or the other?
Well, the short stories take a very long time, and as you know, it's difficult. There's not much market for short stories. Poetry sort of came back to me after I moved to this country. I stopped writing for a long time because moving countries, young family, all that sort of thing, work, and it sort of drains you. And there's periods where you just don't have the energy to create. I used to do a lot of painting, I used to do pottery, I used to do all kinds of things. But you can only do what you can do, and I felt that I was missing something. So when I came back to writing, I concentrated on poems, and my poems are a bit like very, very distilled short stories. That's probably the reason I do them, because I have the time to do it. They do come quite easily to me. When things work, they work very well, very quickly, and then I can fuss with them for ages to get them just right. But I will write something in an afternoon, and I'm going to be quite satisfied, well enough to read it in public. It won't be perfect by any means. And yet sometimes you try and struggle through something that's not natural, doesn't just come out, and it can take you ages to try and write it. And then you realize perhaps that's not something I need to write right now.
Yes, yeah.
That is basically how I approach poetry. Is like when it's ready to come out, it just comes out. That's the way it goes, and I'm happy with that. And then I try and make it into something that's coherent.
Which can be a challenge, of course, for any writer, I suspect.
Course,
but well, look, my last question to you, you've sort of touched on there already, but with poetry, sometimes poetry is written to be read aloud and to be performed a lot of the time. We have performance poets as part of our group. Do you consider yourself a performance poet? Do you consider that as be part of your job as a poet, as a writer? And do you enjoy it, more importantly?
Well, yeah, I do actually enjoy it. Sometimes I enjoy it less than others. I do tend to get a bit nervous about these sorts of things, but I think for poetry to work, it has to be able to be read out loud. It has to sound right. It's a big important part of it. The rhythm has to be there. If you use rhyme, that has to be there. If in a way you're performing the poetry, just reading it, I certainly try my best to to perform it in a way. Yeah, I because of how my work is, I obviously think it needs to be more understated. I don't do this whole that kind of thing. It's just not me, obviously. I mean, you know, there's a limit. But yeah, but I do enjoy it when I've got it right and I know it feels right and I've practiced it enough and it's a poem that I'm happy with. Then yeah, it can be, and it's so rewarding when people really enjoy it and they come and tell you how much what they got out of it. And what I'm most pleased with is people who don't actually have anything to do with poetry normally. And they'll come up to me and it's like, this is the first time I've read poetry, thank you so much, that was great, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, wow, I'm totally fulfilled.
You've accomplished that
Yeah, exactly.
wonderful task.
Something I wasn't expecting at all, and that's just absolutely delightful.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, Mark, I could sit here and talk to you all day, but I mustn't because I'm conscious of time. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Thanet Writers.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. I'm Matthew Munson, and on behalf of Thanet Writers, thank you to Mike Holihan, and see you soon.